Yep.
Yeah, Mike, this is Jim Morris.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say thanks a lot for participating in this. It's great to get things from folks who actually know the details and can pass it on to the teachers. They really appreciate that. And taking your time. I know you have to prepare and everything else too. So we really do appreciate it though, and being a part of us. So it's good for teachers. Thank you very much.
Yeah. I'm thrilled to be here. And Chris and I we've done this once before, so we're ready to go. And thanks
Good.
for inviting us.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, well, it's 10 o'clock on my watch, so we'll go ahead and get started. Again, my name is Chandler Jordan. I'm the Program Director of the South Carolina Council on Economic Education. So all of those lovely emails you get from me, you can now put a face with the emails. I love looking at the chat already. We've got people from Airport High School right here in Columbia, Irmo. We've got Horry County, we've got York County, we've got Myrtle Beach, we've got Barnwell, all of these great districts represented. Thank you guys so much for being with us today. I am going to introduce really quickly our two guests. We have Mike Raymer, who is the Executive Director of the Georgia Council for Econ Education. He's been in that role since 2017, and I'll say he's basically worn every hat there is to wear in the Georgia Council, starting off as a teacher in residence, working his way as program manager and associate director, and then finally executive director. We're so glad to have Mike with us. And we also have his counterpart, Chris Cannon, who is the current associate director and chief program director of the Georgia Council. He has been teaching since 2002, and he also spent some time at the State Department in Georgia. So thank you guys both for being here with us. I'm going to roll it over to you, and I will hang on if you guys have questions. And at the very end, teachers specifically, I'm going to give you instructions on how to fill out the evaluation so that this particular webinar can be one of the credits towards getting that incentive. So stick with me to the end so that I can share that evaluation with you. All right, guys, go ahead.
Thanks, Chandler. I'm going to turn over to Mike here, but before we get rolling, we are definitely going to be doing a couple of interactive things online. So in addition to having your Zoom app open, please open a web browser as well. You won't need to log into anything, but we're going to use a Socrative quiz, and we're going to do an online survey of sorts about halfway through. So if you would have a web browser pulled open, that would be a lot quicker. So thanks a lot.
All right, thank you. I want to say, again, thank you to Chandler and Jim for inviting us to be with you today. And I'm going to talk about something that's probably near and dear to all of your hearts, and that's the BMW factory in Greenville, and a little bit of the reasons why they're there, and bringing it forward to the benefits, financial benefits and economic benefits for South Carolina, as well as a little bit of talk toward sort of the middle of this about the, what would happen if tariffs on steel and aluminum were placed. What might that mean for production in South Carolina? So all of this is going to be based on a lesson plan I wrote, I guess a year and a half ago now, for the Transatlantic Outreach Program. You can see their name at the top of that PowerPoint slide. And in addition to being the executive director of the Georgia Council, I'm also a consultant for Transatlantic Outreach Program. And if you're not familiar with TOP, it's a great organization. They're based in DC, and they do a number of things, which I'll talk about here in a minute. And part of what they do is they have teacher study tours for social studies and STEM teachers to go to Germany, all expense paid trips in the summer. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, maybe the last 10 or 12 minutes of this particular presentation, because you're eligible to go, and it's a great opportunity. And in the past, I was a top fellow, and I traveled to Germany in those years. You can see there in 07, 2012, and again 2016. And it was supposed to go this summer, but it got canceled like everything else did. As we go, Chris is going to be doing all the important behind the scenes kind of technological things, and he's going to tell you where to go for websites and that kind of thing. And Chandler and Chris will be looking at the chat box. We're going to be using the chat box for questions. Obviously, if you have questions, please put them in there, but also to answer some questions to kind of keep you involved as we go through. All right, Chris, want to hit the next slide, please. So I mentioned the overview of TOP and the resources. We're gonna look at the inquiry lesson, and the lesson itself. There's a link that you'll get in an email, I guess, from Chris. that will have the lesson itself in addition to other lessons from top. And then again, we'll have the study tour information and then the Q&A at the end. All right, next one, Chris. And real quick about what TOP is. Again, if you've never heard of this at all and you're like, I have no idea what TOP is, their website's there. You can go and we're done today, but it was founded in 2002 and you can see their mission. I'm not going to read the entire mission to you, but they really are trying to bring social studies teachers from North America, mostly the United States and a few from Canada, together with German educators to kind of talk about how we could, bridge a gap between Germany and North American countries. And they focus on enhancing global competence of students. They want to talk about the skills gap and workforce development, which is kind of tied into what we're going to do today with the BMW lesson. And they really just want to sort of strengthen the bond between Germany and the United States and Canada through education, basically through teachers. And TOP is a public-private partnership. You can see at the bottom there are a number of logos, and they get their funding from the Federal Foreign Office of the German government, something called the Goethe Institute, which promotes Germany and German language around the world. You've all heard of Deutsche Bank. Robert Bosch Stiftung. Bosch is an auto parts manufacturer, and they have a pretty big foundation. And then the Siemens Corporation, which you probably all heard of Siemens. It's a huge, multinational corporation based in Germany. So anyway, so I encourage you when we're done today to take a couple minutes, if you've never heard of TOP, to kind of poke around their website and learn more about them. I should have mentioned early on, I was a classroom teacher for 9 years, just south of Atlanta. And I used TOP materials in my classroom every semester, basically, because they have a lot of really great stuff. Not just economics, but government and geography and other things as well. All right, so next slide, Chris. And some of the materials, or all of the materials, excuse me, come at no financial charge to you. And on their website, you can go and you can download, copies virtually, or you can actually order them and get them in the mail if you want. And I've listed just a few here. They have many, many more. But the lesson we're going to look at today comes out of that second one, the Germany in Focus Inquiry Edition. And this is their most recent publication. It's an update to lessons that they had out a couple years ago. And they are inquiry lessons, if that's something that your school is stressing or you use in your classroom. Okay, next slide, Chris. So what I want to do is again, talk about a lesson that I wrote for them. It's the idea of why did BMW come to Greenville and what were the reasons behind it. And I want to start with the question you see at the bottom of the screen, which is where is BMW's largest manufacturing facility in the world? And in the chat box, if you could type in your answer, city, country, whatever you think it might be, just throw it in there for us and we will see what we have. So go ahead and answer that question, please. Where is BMW's largest manufacturing facility in the world? And seeing that you're all from South Carolina, I'm glad to see that the answers are Spartanburg or Greer or South Carolina. Yes, that's great. If you are living and teaching in the Greenville area, probably your students will answer that question with correct answers. If you're in another part of the state, maybe you might get some different answers. If I was to ask my students here in Atlanta, where's the biggest BMW manufacturer in the world? Probably all of them would say Germany, right? BMW is headquartered in Munich. There's a huge factory there. That's probably the answer they would give over and over again. But again, you guys are there, so your students, their parents might work there. So this is a great, in your community, in your state, lesson that will really, I think, resonate with your students, as so many of them are probably familiar with BMW and its impact. And not just in Greenville. I mean, if you connect upstate with the low country in the port, I think there's a nice connection. You could probably build a pretty good case for this plant is benefiting and having an impact all across South Carolina, not just in Greenville. All right, next one, Chris, please. Okay, so what I want to do with this lesson, and I'm moving my chat box, there we go. The lesson itself is written as if you're going to be teaching in a classroom in the normal times and you're actually seeing your students in person every day. And there's kind of 3 parts to it. And the lesson says it's like a 2-day lesson, but obviously you could make this shorter or longer depending on your schedule. With the current closing of schools and going virtual, I think this lesson is also a great opportunity to use it virtually if you had to, because it lends itself, I think, very well to setting up questions for students virtually, which they can work on and then come back together as a group and talk about the lesson. So I think it would work great in the classroom. I know it will work great in the classroom, but I also think it's a pretty good lesson to do virtually as well. And we're going to be looking at 3 different supporting questions, and you can see them there. The first one being, what are the economic factors that led BMW to select Greer for their first manufacturing facility outside of Germany? So back in the early 90s, Germany, BMW was producing all of their vehicles inside of Germany, and they had an idea of, hey, let's go somewhere else in the world and build, SUVs. And we're going to find out why they selected Greer. The second question, what are the economic benefits for South Carolina as a result of BMW's decisions to invest in Plant Spartanburg? Obviously, this has a huge impact on all of you working in and living in South Carolina. I would give my left arm to have a huge, giant auto manufacturer move to my town or my state. We do have Kia here in Georgia, but we would love to have another one because I know the economic impact is going to be pretty massive for an auto manufacturer in the state. And then the third one, which is still kind of a current event, I think. Not long ago, within the last 1.5 years, 2 years, President Trump started talking about steel and aluminum tariffs and balancing our trade with other countries. And the question becomes, what will happen to a place like BMW in South Carolina or Kia in Georgia if we all of a sudden have pretty large steel and aluminum tariffs on these products coming into our country? So that's the third thing we're going to look at. All right, so next slide, Chris. So we're going to start with this commercial, which came out, I think, 2 years ago during a Super Bowl, and I'm sure you probably have seen it. Maybe your students have not. So fire away, Chris.
Does it make sense that a German car company would break ground in Spartanburg, South Carolina, and call it home?
Does it make sense that they build over 400,000 sports activity vehicles a year?
And customize them millions of different ways. Does it make sense?
Does it make sense?
Does it make sense that BMW's largest factory in the world
is in this small town in the South?
It makes perfect sense.
The BMW X4, X5, X6, and the all-new X3, designed in Germany, built in America.
Okay, so does it make sense? And of course, all of you are like, yeah, of course it makes perfect sense. This is your state. And this is, again, cool because you might know someone in that video or one of your students is like, oh, that's my neighbor or whatever. The other great thing, if I'm teaching in South Carolina, is that I want my students to see this because some of them will be working there someday. And I know that auto manufacturers generally pay really high wages and they have great working conditions, and it's not like an old sweaty, smelly factory that you might think of from the 1960s. There's a big, clean, high-tech companies that are looking for highly skilled workers that potentially could work there for 30 years and have a great career. So this is something I if you're not doing it, definitely be talking to your students about the potential of them going to work at BMW someday in some capacity because they employ a lot of people in South Carolina. All right, next slide. So quickly, just a little, map with students, and you can show them on a map like where Munich is, again, the headquarters of BMW, and start trying to pull out of them, like, why on earth would BMW, this huge German auto manufacturer, very successful, has great vehicles, why would they come, 4,600 miles to Spartanburg, South Carolina to build their plant when they really could have A, stayed in Germany and not gone anywhere, or B, gone pretty much anywhere else in the world with the exception of a few countries? Why did they pick Spartanburg? And that's the first activity I want to talk to you about. And if Chris, you want to hit the next slide, that's what we're going to do. Okay. So what we're going to do here in a second, and Chris is going to explain the technology behind it, but basically we're looking at the idea of back in the early 90s, again, when BMW decided as a company, we're going to expand, we're going to go build our vehicles somewhere else in addition to Germany. Where are we going to go, right? So they had these high-level discussions probably for years and years and years, and did a lot of investigating and went around the world and heard from different governments about why they should come to that area. And that's what we're going to simulate here, okay? So we're going to pretend that each of you is a high-level executive at BMW. Congratulations. And you've been given the task of ranking a list of factors your company is examining before you decide where to locate your facility, all right? And what you're going to do when you see these 7 factors, you're going to rank them. 1, this is my most important factor. This is the thing that I think as a BMW executive, what I think is the most important before we find and locate to another area of the world. All right, so Chris, if you want to jump in and explain what we're doing here.
Okay, so you want to, in your web browser, type in that link that's at the bottom, bit.ly/BMW ranking. I also put it in the chat box if you just want to copy and paste it. It does not link automatically just because I didn't put all the HTTP stuff in front of it, which I should have in retrospect, I guess, and you could just click on it. So it's bit.ly/BMW ranking. And you'll know you're in the correct place if you get a, hey, let me move some stuff around here. You should get something that looks like what you're seeing on the screen now. And the whole idea here is you're going to drag these cards over from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. So if you believe, for example, like Mike said, the most important thing is that you have, let's see, low cost of labor. Let's say you think that's the most important. Then you drag that over to the right-hand side and you put that up top, and it'll tell you that you've ranked that number 1. So we're gonna give you a few minutes to do this. Again, it's bit.ly/BMW ranking. It's in the chat box. You can copy and paste. Yeah, go ahead and rank those, and we'll check back in with you here in just a minute. And I will display the results here momentarily.
We should have theme music here, Chris.
Yeah, I messed up on the
survey music.
All right, good. So people are in. This is good. I'm seeing results. And I'll talk a little bit about what we're using to do this and how you might be able to replicate this here in a moment as well. 11 results in. I got a couple of questions in the chat box. Can you see my results? They're all in together, so sure. I could probably pull yours out individually if I wanted to, but no need to for what we're doing. Still just 11 in. I was hoping we get a few more folks in there. And sometimes there's a slight delay on the results end of things. So I'm sure more than 11 of you have probably answered. Let's do one more refresh and then we'll go ahead. No, yep. Oh, there we go. We're up to 26 now. All right, so Mike, so before Mike talks about the results there, what you just did was a survey gizmo. So if you were trying to replicate this in class, there's a couple of ways you could do it. You can use that link, but you wouldn't have any access to the results because it comes into our results thing. But those cards that you were using to move over, those are in the lesson plan. So you could build this same exact thing in a Socrative, or you could build it in even a Kahoot. For example, they have a new feature in Kahoot now where it's a little free form answer, or any other kind of result. Or you just do a paper and pencil. If you wanted to do it that way and have the kids call out their results and things like that. They could also shuffle cards. There's a lot of different ways to do it. But what we just did was put them into a survey gizmo because we had access to that. And what you're seeing on the screen now are the results of that survey. So this indicates that 26 people ranked this. And the way it scores it is basically if you ranked it as a number 1, it gives it 7 points. If you ranked it number 2, it gives it 6, so on and so forth. So the workforce readiness got 121 points, making it the most popular here. So that's what you're looking at. Now let Mike talk a little bit about what's going on with those results.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. All right, so these are very interesting results. I'm looking through them, I have them listed here. All right, what jumps out at me is that number 7, the low cost of labor. And I'm thinking like a student. Back when I taught, again, this is a couple years ago, taught for 9 years, and whenever you mentioned international trade, and back then it was more United States, companies going to like China. Why are they doing that? Students would typically list the low cost of labor as the number 1 reason why companies are outsourcing jobs. So it's interesting to see that it's ranked last here. You guys got workforce readiness, skilled workers, which you needed a lot of skilled workers at a place like an auto manufacturing, transportation infrastructure, taxation, tariff policies, and you can see the rest. Okay, so what I would sort of get my students thinking about a number of things. One, what kind of jobs are needed? Like, what are the skilled jobs at a place like the BMW factory? If you want to type in some answers in your chat box, if you've ever visited a huge auto manufacturing, what are the workers doing there? Like, so put in 1 or 2 answers if you can think of anything. So what kind of skilled jobs are needed at BMW? Anyone? I'm looking at the chat box. IT, CAD, machinists, not many. It's actually, that one went by too quick. Engineers, welders, technical. Yeah, there's a lot of technology. Like it's again, it's not, like your father's, factory. It's really high tech everything. Machines are doing so much of the work. So you need people that are technologically sound that can fix those machines if they do break, God forbid. But there are many, 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 many different really highly skilled positions that are needed to be filled. So that's something that, yes, BMW definitely looked at that heavily. Workforce readiness, taxation, obviously BMW would prefer to pay lower taxes and lower tariffs than higher. We saw the access to suppliers and transportation infrastructure. Now it's been ranked 41 times, it's jumped to number 1.
Yeah, I was going to say I refreshed the page and yeah, that moved up, but it's still neck and neck. Real quick, I saw in the chat box, Mike, you'll remember this as well. Beth Bridges says her brother-in-law works on the robots that do the or builds and repairs the robots that are used at BMW. I remember when we toured the Kia plant one time, the guy doing the tour asked the group, he said, "Who's the most important person in the factory?" And we all gave, what, the CEO or whatever answer. He said, "No, person who builds and repairs the robots," so they can keep going.
Yeah, because when one robot goes down, basically the whole plant has to kind of wait for that robot to get back up. Okay, so now transportation infrastructure is up top, number 1, and I want to talk about that briefly. It's vitally important. And I'm doing research for this lesson. I found when BMW was really getting serious about locating in the United States, they had, basically every state in the Southeast was pitching them hard and offering all kinds of incentives. And then Nebraska was also in the running, which really surprised me. And I don't know how far they got down the line. Because what's the one vital thing as far as infrastructure goes that Nebraska lacks versus a place like South Carolina or Georgia? A port, right? It would be really difficult to get all of your steel and aluminum on, off a boat if it's being imported onto a train and then sent out to Nebraska. That would be just too much time. Whereas, as you know, in your state, you've got the Charleston with the deep water port there, and you've got access to I-95, which is really, really important for BMW to get their products built and out the door and shipped out to sellers around the country and other parts of the world as well. All right, so that's again something you can do with your students, and the answer to this, there's really not one, there's not one answer like that's the right answer. All 7 of these were the key factors that BMW looked at before they decided to come to South Carolina. And if BMW is going to tomorrow build a factory somewhere else, I guarantee you these 7 things are the key factors they're going to look at before they make the decision. So it's a combination of all these things that brought them to your state, right? And you can see back on the PowerPoint here, this is an example of direct foreign investment. Like if you're talking about that with your students in class, or high school class, probably more than middle school class, this is a great example. And I've gone through, jumped ahead, there you go. And so I've gone through and I did a little research, and in South Carolina, here are one, two, three, four, five other German companies that are directly investing in your state. Some have to do with auto manufacturers, some don't. But this is a very common thing in many or most states in the country where you got foreign companies directly investing in your area. And Chris, if you hit the bar one time, we got examples. There you go. So when your students are thinking about this, like, you can ask them, can you think of other examples of direct foreign investment in South Carolina? And you can make this a little research project if you want, where your students have to find 2-3 companies in your town or your county or your state that are, from another country. But then also don't forget to talk about how you have US companies like Coke and UPS going to other countries and investing in other countries as well. So this isn't just a one-way street. It goes both ways. Okay, one more click, Chris. Go to the next slide. All right, so supporting question number 2. So that one, we've established sort of why BMW came to South Carolina. Then the second part of the lesson gets into what are the economic benefits for South Carolina as a result of this decision to come to Plant Spartanburg. And this one is linked to a student reading, and it's from the University of South Carolina. It's an economic report. They basically, on the 20th anniversary of BMW being in your state, did a report, and it talked about the direct, indirect, and induced benefits of BMW coming to South Carolina. As part of this webinar, I'm not going to ask you to sit and read this because that would be, it would take up a good chunk of the webinar, and I don't want to do that. But basically, it comes down to a number of questions that we're going to do in a little quiz here in a second. And before we get there, and before you assign this to your students, I would kind of quickly, or not so quickly, go over the differences between direct investment, indirect investment, and induced investment. And you can see the definitions there. And the economic study looks at all of these effects, not just BMW hires this many workers. No, it's they hire this many workers, they contract with that company down the street, buy products from them. The people in the town of that particular company, they go out to eat, and they work in restaurants. And so it's all the multiplier effect together, not just BMW, hiring X number of workers. All right, so we're going to do a quick quiz, and there's only 3 questions, and Chris is going to jump back in and explain how to take this quiz.
All right, so back in your web browser, this is super straightforward here. You are heading to, this time, Socrative.com or Socrative.com. And I'll put that in the chat box again too, if you want to just copy and paste it. And then when you get there, when you pull up Socrative.com, it's going to ask you, do you want to do a student login or a teacher login? You are a student. You're a student, you're a student, you're a student. When we did this last time, we had somebody fuss at us because you can tell us we need a teacher account. You don't need a teacher account to do this. You are a student. So you don't no sign in at all needed. So you're going to click student login. Then it's going to ask you for a room code, and you're just going to enter my name. It's highlighted right there in bright yellow. So Socrative.com. You are a student, so click student login, please, and then enter my name. I'll leave that up on the screen for a minute or two. And what do you call this? The impact quiz is already pulled up, so you can go ahead and start answering. I can see that people are already doing so on my end, so that's good. This is where the Jeopardy music would be good to have.
Yes.
We'll get that for next time.
Or music from South Carolina.
Yes, even better.
Hootie and the Blowfish.
Oh, that would be great.
I don't know any other South Carolina bands.
I do, but they wouldn't be well known. All right, so we got plenty of people in, so I'm going to go ahead and, back up. Don't want to do that yet. All right, so what you are seeing, let's not show the answers just yet. Some of you are still working. Now, I did not have you put in your names. Had I have had you put in your names, I would be able to see your actual names. One of the things we try to do, sorry about that. One of the things we try to do often at the Georgia Council is expose teachers to different kinds of technology that they may or may not be familiar with. Socrative is not a secret. A lot of people know it. But if you've never seen it, it's got some really cool features. It's super easy to set up. This thing you're doing, for example, probably took me start to finish, like log into the computer, get everything pulled up to get to this point. Probably was like 12 or 13 minutes. And a good chunk of that was just copying and pasting the questions over. So it's a really simple thing. And what I like about it is I can very quickly reveal the answers here. Again, if I had your names, I could see everybody's names as well. And it does a couple of things for me. For example, one, it shows me that question 1, students had trouble with. Now, in this case, it's not really a content question, it's just for discussion. But let's say this was a question that you really wanted students to know the answer to. You can look at number 1 here and see that the students are all over the place on this one, which indicates they're probably guessing. There's a couple of D answers, there's lots of C, there's some B, there's an A thrown in, another A. So I look at this and I go, wow, I really need to reteach whatever question 1 told me, or whatever question 1 was asking. Question 2 fared a little bit better. Got about 47% of the people getting that one right. So anyway, that's what it's used for. It's a free resource. They do have a paid tier, but everything you're seeing is free. I used this all the time in my classroom for stuff like this, just quick generating questions. It got to the point where the students would come in and they knew to just log into Socrative because they knew we'd be using it before the end of the period. So anyway, so that's Socrative. I don't know if there's anything else in the results section we really needed, but we just wanted to expose you to that. And yeah, we did okay on question 2, not so good on the others. So Mike, I'll turn it back over to you and we'll go back to the questions and talk about those.
And again, these questions the students are guessing, and I don't expect them to know these things off the top of their head, unless they do the reading. Now, if they do the reading that was assigned, they should know the answer to these questions, because that's where I pulled the questions directly from. And again, the purpose of the reading is to get your students realizing, like, holy smokes, this company coming here and building a factory in Greenville has a huge economic, gives a huge economic boost to our state economy. And you can see, again, we bring in the direct and indirect costs there of their annual economic output, almost 17 billion. How many jobs are supported, again, directly, indirectly, in South Carolina, almost 30,000. And then the last point there talks about a multiplier effect of, for every 1 job we create at BMW, there's going to be 3 more jobs in another part of the state that are created because of this, which is important, right? And again, by you explaining the direct, indirect, and induced effects, this will make much more sense for students as they go through that reading. So the takeaway for me here with the reading is your students really, for the first time maybe in their lives, are thinking past, oh, there's this big, shiny, cool looking factory in Greenville, to getting into the actual numbers and the, seeing what potentially is happening and is happening in South Carolina, which is really super important. Next one, Chris.
Before we move on, I got a couple of private messages to me in the chat box. Yes, you will definitely get this PowerPoint. I don't have your email, so Chandler, will probably work best if I just send you the link to this, and then maybe you could distribute it out to your email list or whatever.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, cool. So yeah, everything you'll get here, and that Socrative you could use just as is. It's a publicly listed it's a public Socrative, and you just need the code, which I will go back and put in on the previous page here. I'll put it back on this page. So down here at the bottom, I'll put the actual code. So if you create your own Socrative account, you would just go in and search for that code, and you can use it just as is.
All right. Next slide. There you go. And again, these next 2 slides are sort of brief summaries that I've pulled out of that reading and a couple other readings, just talking about, talking points for you that you can share with your students. And again, it really to reinforce the huge impact BMW is having in South Carolina with the multiplier, jobs created. The last point there are multipliers, one of the highest of the state, twice as high as the average multiplier effects of all industries. And I mentioned earlier why states are really happy when they land an auto manufacturer. It's because of this, because auto manufacturing involves a lot of other companies, because BMW is not producing everything themselves. So they might buy the tires, or they might buy the seats or the headlights or the wiring from other companies. And oftentimes those companies end up building facilities next to a place like BMW to feed BMW basically every day for the the goods they need to make their final product. All right, next one, Chris.
Mike, yeah, question in the chat. How do you know how lengthy the article is off the top of your head?
Yeah, it's I think 8 pages, but there is an executive summary at the front, so it's not a huge, long, heavy lift. And if I think if you have some middle school students, probably the executive summary might be good enough for them. All right, next slide. Some more talking points here. This gets into exports and imports, that kind of thing. And you can see that the second bullet point down, BMW is not selling all of their X Series SUVs here in the United States. They're exporting a lot of them. So they've got a huge export value going out. And in the third bullet point down, they talk about numbers. About 70% of their SUVs that they're producing there are being exported somewhere else, not all consumed here. And then the last bullet point we talked about earlier, and you guys all knew the answer to this. And BMW is the largest plant in the world in terms of vehicle production volume, which is super impressive considering it's been there, for a little more than 20 years. And I just linked another article here. It's from the Greenville News. And this article I found after I wrote the lesson plan. But it's a great article talking again about the tariff idea, and it really interviews some folks that actually work there. And if you go to that website, the article itself has a link where if you want, you can assign it, and it's actually someone reading the article for students, so they wouldn't have to read it themselves. So if you've got younger kids, or if you want to assign it in class or something, they can listen to it, kind of thing. But it really, I think, is a great article to summarize sort of the personal impact this has, because it talks to folks who actually work at the factory. All right, next one, Chris. And the third question, supporting question we're going to talk about here, kind of brings the lesson all together, and it's the idea again of how are these proposed steel and aluminum tariffs affecting or going to affect BMW's ability to produce vehicles in South Carolina. And here, if you haven't done so already, you obviously need to define what a tariff is. And the last time we did this, someone asked me, like, where would you teach this lesson and what unit? For me, this would be in my international trade unit, and it might be a good way to kick off my international trade unit. I would have to define some things ahead of time, but this might be a good way to sort of dip your toe into trade and how different countries, interact with each other, that sort of thing. And this student reading, which is a little bit shorter than the previous one, it's a New York Times article. There's the headline there. And right after President Trump announced tariffs on steel and aluminum, a lot of folks in South Carolina, the Chamber of Commerce was sort of taken aback a little bit. And the mayor of Greenville, I read something that was said from their office. They were really sort of like, wait a minute, these tariffs are going to really impact us negatively. We need to really kind of think this through before we start throwing tariffs around. And the activity here in this part of the lesson, in a classroom, in my mind, I'm going to have all of my students stand up, and I'm going to have one side of the room with a big sign that says helped. The other side of the room is going to say hurt. And there are a few different scenarios that we're going to go through. And you read a scenario and you actually have your kids vote with their feet. So Chris, if you want to click at one time, the first scenario in this lesson is, imagine you're a US auto parts manufacturer, right? Like BMW. And a lot of the steel and aluminum that you use to build your vehicles, because there's a lot of steel and aluminum in SUVs, it's imported from other countries, right? So if all of a sudden we've got a tariff on imported steel and aluminum, is this going to help your business or hurt your business? Okay. And at this point, you're going to have your students move to the help sign or the hurt sign. But what I'm going to have you do, because we can't actually move around here, I'm going to have you in the chat box type help or hurt. So the first scenario being, you're a US auto parts manufacturer. Is this tariff going to help you or hurt you? Hurt. Some in all caps, yes. Obviously, this is something that you would oppose, because all of a sudden you're thinking, wait a minute, my steel or aluminum is now going to cost more. Excuse me, if you're an auto parts manufacturer, you're going to have to pay more to get that imported steel. So this is something that you're not a fan of, and this is going to hurt you financially, right? So again, you're going to center your kids back into the middle of the room. The second one, if you hit the bar one time, Chris, you're a U.S. senator from a steel producing state. Okay, so you're a senator, you're from a steel producing state, you're hearing this talk of tariffs. Is this going to help you or hurt you? Straight A's to all you guys. Oh, we had one hurt in there. Yeah, this will help you in air quotes, because all of a sudden, what are the steel producers in your state doing? They're probably producing more steel because the steel that's being imported maybe costs more than yours does now. So it's helping you, giving you a boost. And this is one of the reasons why politicians impose tariffs, right? To protect, domestic producers of products like steel and aluminum. Third one, you are a U.S. aluminum industry worker, and we have a lot of aluminum jobs here in our country. So is this tariff going to help you or hurt you? U.S. aluminum industry worker. Got a lot of helps, mostly helps. We got one hurt, help. This is going to help you, right? Because all of a sudden the foreign aluminum costs more because of this tariff than yours. So it might make a company like BMW look at you a little more closely and say, oh, we're going to buy our aluminum from them instead of from this company that we're buying overseas. Number 4, you are Coca-Cola. What does Coca-Cola care about aluminum? Well, their cans are aluminum. I once had a meeting at Coca-Cola and they said how much aluminum they buy every year, and it was a staggering amount of aluminum. And they don't buy all their aluminum from US companies. They're buying it globally. So yes, this will hurt Coca-Cola's bottom line, and it will definitely cost a company like Coca-Cola, millions or billions of dollars because they're buying so much aluminum globally all the time. Number 5, you are a foreign auto tool and machine part maker, right? So you're located, let's say, in England or Germany or Brazil, and you're not dealing with this tariff, right? So I'm seeing mostly helps, got a couple hurts. This one is actually going to help you because you're not paying that tariff, right? So all of a sudden, again, your products that you produce with steel and aluminum may cost less in your country. So maybe, businesses in your country are buying your steel and aluminum because of it costs more here in the United States. So this is going to help you. And number 6, the final one, you're a BMW worker at Plant Spartanburg. What do you got? Helped, hurt. We got hurt. Yeah, I'm seeing, got one help. Hurts across the line. And this is the whole point of the article, right? So it's the author of the article came and actually spoke with people at the factory and people in Greenville, and they talked about this. And potentially, if it costs more to make BMWs, they might be making fewer BMWs, which might mean fewer jobs. So there was really a sense of, oh boy, this might not be a good thing for BMW throughout the article. All right, so next slide, Chris. So as the lesson itself, again, we got 3 different parts to it. There were 3 different questions we answered. And then the summative task, if you choose to take it this way, I would have my students, create an essay or a poster or PowerPoint or something addressing the compelling questions we spoke of, and talking about the relevant evidence. And on top of that, I would try to add something about the competing views to this, because whenever a company comes to a state like South Carolina and they promise the moon and they have all these, thousands of jobs and this great multiplier, there's always someone out there that's going to be like, well, wait a minute, we need to talk about the cost of this, right? So I would have my students investigate what are the folks out there that are against, a company like BMW coming to South Carolina. And you might think no one would be against this, but I promise you there's people out there that are against, companies coming and states giving incentives and tax breaks and that kind of thing. So I think it's good to acknowledge that so your students don't walk away thinking everyone's in favor of this and this is the greatest thing ever, because there are arguments out there that these jobs cost a lot of money and who's paying for that kind of thing, right? And then if you want to extend it even a little bit more, going back to the idea of foreign direct investment, again, have your students research companies in your state that are foreign based. And I think you'll be surprised, they'll be surprised of how many South Carolinians actually work for companies that are headquartered in other countries. I know here in Georgia, it's hundreds of thousands of Georgians work for foreign based companies. So when you hear discussions about tariffs and limiting trade with the countries and making everything in America, like that's going to have real costs for these people who are working for companies based in other countries. All right. And again, the link there, and again, you'll get all this PowerPoint. The link there is a direct link to the actual lesson. So when you finish this, if you're like, where do I find the lesson? Right there, click on that. You'll find the lesson. All right, next one, Chris. And we are looking at the clock. We got 15 minutes. So questions about the lesson. I think that the easiest thing, if you do have questions about the lesson that are like pretty detailed, at the very end of this PowerPoint, you'll find my email. And if you email me about a question you have about the lesson, I think it'd be easiest that way because of time, and I'll answer your questions best I can about that. So if you do have questions, send me an email, and I'd be happy to talk about it. Again, I know people who used it and they've said it worked well and it didn't have any hitches in it. And again, you can do it in person or you can do it virtually if you want. I think either way is going to work just fine. All right, next one, Chris. We've got a few minutes left. With the remaining 10 minutes we have, I want to spend a little time talking about travel tours to Germany for teachers like you that you potentially could go on and experience Germany yourself. So you want to hit that video, Chris, then I'll do a little more talking.
We've been to so many different places. Frankfurt and Bad Wildbad, Heidelberg and Point Office Stiftung and Geisa and Berlin.
That's most surprising is seeing how Germany is working to embrace its diversity.
We learned about the coalition and the Green Party.
Devotion to environmentalism.
And for example, going to the Deutsche Bank and seeing a modern skyscraper that doesn't have air conditioning, uses rainwater for some of its plumbing.
This is cool, huh?
It's so awesome.
The standards that I teach are World War I, World War II, and the Holocaust. So before I came here, they asked us to write down those 3 words. What do you know about Germany? And I wrote aggression, beer, and Holocaust, which isn't really a great thing to think about a country. The first day we got here, I was talking to somebody next to me about this beautiful gold dome building I'd seen out of my hotel room. And this stranger was listening while we were talking and stopped everything of their wonderful Sunday excursion to take us for a walk to go see it. And it's just immediately, right? I'd been here 2 hours and I already lost all of those words that I brought with me. So my new 3 words that I wrote yesterday were hospitality, openness, and determination.
If you come here, you can, especially talking to people on the subway, talking to people at a restaurant, they will give you honest answers. I don't think just reading things out of a book can really give you that authenticity.
We've set up an exchange with a German teacher I met while on my study tour, and his class of students and my class of students are going to be sending each other videos and perhaps Skyping so that they can continue to learn more about each other's culture and way of life. When we were on our study tour, they asked us, what are 3 words that come to mind when you hear Germany? And I wanted to hear what you think of that. What are 3 words that come to your minds?
Okay, so brief little video explaining a little bit about the study tours for TOP. I can tell you they're typically, these study tours are two weeks in length. You travel in June and July. All expense paid with the exception of maybe a baggage fee, or if you go out at night yourself or you buy souvenirs for yourself, you have to pay for that. But the flights, the hotels, the food, you're going to museums and stuff like that, all of that is paid for by TOP. The applications themselves are online in the fall in October. That's when they're released, and then you have until the end of January to actually, write your essays, and there's usually like 3 essays, and submit them. The eligible applicants, anyone, and this is everyone on this call, K-12 social studies and STEM educators, university methods professors, curriculum developers, administrators, are eligible to actually apply and go. I've done a few study tours in my time, and I can tell you without fail that these top study tours are easily the best professional development I've ever had in my life. I went thinking one thing about Germany, modern Germany, and how Germany interacts with the rest of the world, and I came away with a totally different, new way of looking at Germany. And again, I could really bring it back into my classroom in a number of different ways, and my students were better off because of it. While you're there, you're going to visit schools. Like, you're actually going to be in classrooms with the German teachers and German students, seeing how they do things. You're going to visit German businesses, large and small, government institutions, and historical sites. It's not just you get on a bus and you drive around and look out the window. You're actually on the ground, meeting Germans, living like a German, eating like a German, drinking like a German, for 2 full weeks. And the whole point is to get you to experience modern Germany in Germany, because Germany, after World War II, really had, a lot of people had some negative, feelings about the country. So they're really trying to get past World War II and what happened in the past to get people to realize that Germany is this, really vibrant, booming, multicultural country that is connected to places like South Carolina through business. And you'll come away with just so many great experiences. I'm pretty confident of that. All right, next slide, Chris. All right, so what I have here is just a couple quick stories. I mentioned that you visit schools, and one of the things that the German school system is doing, in my opinion, I think better than we are in this country, is their VOTEC kind of classes are really well advanced past where we are. This is an example of a school we visited where the students are learning to be plumbers. And we walked into this room and you could see all this plumbing on the wall. And I don't know if you could read that, but that toilet is a German toilet manufacturer. And the companies in Germany are really working closely with schools and government. So they donate their materials, in this case, toilets and plumbing supplies, to the school. So the students in the school can learn how to work on modern, actual plumbing, fixtures. So when they get out in the real world, they'll have experience working on things that they're going to have to see. The same school had an auto shop, and in the auto shop we walked in, and all the vehicles being worked on were brand new Mercedes-Benzes and Porsches and BMWs that the companies donated to the schools, because they know that these are the things that the kids are going to need to work on, not some old clunker that someone donated from the 1970s. And the school also had a construction arm to it, and the kids actually throughout the school year built an entire house. That was their project, which I thought was pretty impressive. So they're really trying to get German students ready for the future, and they do a pretty good job with these kind of schools. Next slide, Chris. We visited, this is a picture of a Volkswagen. We visited Volkswagen in one of my trips in Wolfsburg, which is where Volkswagen is headquartered. And if you buy a vehicle in Wolfsburg, you can actually go to the factory, and this is like a 6-story round kind of cylinder building where a robot goes and retrieves your cars and bring it back down for you. I've been told this is also in Mission Impossible. I didn't see that movie, but I've heard that. Historically, you're going to see some neat things that you might miss if you go on your own, because each town that you go to, you're going to have 2 or 3 German guides with you who become your best friends for the 4 or 5 days and you're in that town. And they're going to take you kind of behind the scenes of everything and really get you focused on some important things that you might miss if you just go there as a tourist. This was in Leipzig, and when the revolution started in '89, or before that even, there's a church right next to this plaque where the clergy of this church kind of let people come and talk, and they didn't report anybody. And this is where the revolution really started in Leipzig. And I don't know if you can see, but there's like footprints on that gold plaque to commemorate the folks who lost their lives in the struggle when the wall finally did come down. And this is literally this is outside of my hotel window. I could look out and see this. And I know if I went there myself, I might have missed all of this. I don't know if I would have asked, like, what's that plaque on the ground for? But here we had, guides showing us and talking to us about it, which was really fantastic. One more click, Chris. The other thing, this is taken in the Reichstag, and every group that goes there visits this particular building. And this is where, the German government meets, and Angela Merkel sits like right down there. And there's a big glass dome on the top of this so the Germans can actually go up and look down into their government. So it's a very open, transparent kind of thing. And I'm showing you this picture because of the people in the photo. For me, the great takeaway, in addition to experiencing Germany, is meeting new people. So these are teachers from all over the country who I met and am friends with many of them still, and I talk to many of them pretty regularly. So it's a great way to connect with people in other parts of the country and in some in Canada to get new ideas about how to teach, and you walk away with these great, lifetime friends from this trip, which is a great bonus too. All right, so is there one more slide, Chris? Yes. So again, questions about the study tour, if you have any, if you see the web link at the top there, you can go to the top website and many of them will be answered there. But again, if you want to email me directly, I'll be happy to, answer any questions I can. I will give you a bit of advice with a minute or two I have left here. If you choose to apply, and I hope that all of you do, because it really is a life-changing event going on one of these trips, think about how this will benefit your students when you come back, your community when you come back, and your coworkers when you come back, and try to put that into your essays for the into the application, because they're sending you on this trip, and they're paying for everything. Everyone's always like, what's the catch? Well, the catch is when you come back, TOP wants you to talk about modern Germany and all the great things that are happening there, again, to build these relationships between German companies and German government and our governments and our government and businesses. So that's kind of the catch. Just how will this make you better and make your students better? And I think the great advantage that you have is that you have BMW in your state and all these other German companies that are there in your state. You can talk about the impact that Germany is having in your state and how your students are relating to that. So for me, that's how I would approach this. If I was teaching in South Carolina, I would bring in, things like BMW and talk about it and how you want to make the connection even stronger. All right. Again, if you have questions, my email, Chris, if you hit the slide one more time, I believe my email is right. One more slide. Is there one more slide? Yep, there you go. So there's my email. There's a photo taken in Berlin. It's part of the Berlin Wall that's still standing, not much left, but that's one part of it. I want to thank Chandler and Jim again for having us, and for Chris doing all the great behind the scenes stuff. Chandler, anything you want to add or talk about?
Thank you so much. Just to let you guys know, I will follow up with an email that will include this PowerPoint, Mike's contact information, and a direct link to the TOPS outreach program, just so you can go ahead and look and get that application. So when it opens in October, that you can have that on your calendar if it is something that you're interested in pursuing. And of course, I'm sure you can reach out to Mike at any point in time if you have questions regarding either this lesson or the TOPS program. I also want to say that next week, same time, same place, we're going to have Chris back with us doing an allocating resources. And then the following week on the 23rd, we're actually going to have Mark Williams from Strategic Development present. And the cool thing about Mark is that he was part of the team that actually brought BMW to South Carolina. So Strategic Development is a firm which they look at why we pick site selection. So if you kind of got interested in the idea of that through this PowerPoint or through this presentation, I strongly encourage you to jump on with that one. And then finally, we will have Mike back on the 21st of July, going a little more in depth with trade relations. So again, I'll share all that out with you in an email. I am posting the evaluation in the chat. I am going to take back over. I'm going to reclaim host from you, Chris. So that you guys can go ahead and exit. Thank you so much. We are so happy to have you with us today, and we look forward to working with you in the